Unit 3, this does tend to be the point where people are afraid. They get afraid, well, I'm not sure I understand it. What if I do it wrong? And of course, in the seminar, we go through The Fox and the Crow, which is a great story. Why? Because it fits the story sequence chart perfectly. We also do The Bat and the Nightingale, which doesn't quite fit as perfectly, but you see how it comes out in the wash. I will tell you now, from the years of experience that I've spent, the last 7, 8 years, traveling around teaching, any story you give me will work on the story sequence chart. No matter how absurd, no matter how nonsensical, no matter how confusing you think it is, if you simply ask the questions, it will work. And just to build it up very quickly, what's the first section? You should have this on the tip of your tongues right now. First part is characters and setting. Second part is conflict or problem. Third part is climax and resolution. Okay? Those are the 3 parts of the story sequence chart, and initially we could recommend a 3-paragraph story based on these 3 parts. Now, if you just say to a kid, okay, write about the characters and setting, that may not do it. Why? It's not teaching the skill of thinking. The skill of thinking is to ask yourself questions. So you want, on your wall, on your story sequence chart, you want the questions too. What's the questions that go with character? Who's in the story? What are they like? What's their situation? What's their circumstance? Right? And then setting, of course, we're talking about what? Where and when. And the goal of description, the goal of all this is to do what? To build a strong image. When you describe the characters and you describe the setting and you tell what they look like and what they smell like and what the scenario is, you're creating in children, right? Or creating in the reader a more detailed image. One thing I've started to do recently, and I don't know if any of you have done it with me, we didn't make it on the video, is this little exercise a few times when we hit Unit 3 to help children understand that it's words that create imagery in your imagination. Close your eyes for a minute. Pretend you're 10 years old. Some of you don't have to pretend. Okay, I'm going to just say some words, and you just watch what happens in your brain. Watch what happens in your mind. You ready? House. 2-story. Green. White trim. Shutters. Brick chimney. Beach. Sunset. Veranda. Seagulls. Okay, open your eyes. Now, that was a fairly limited number of words, fewer than 10 words. What happened with each word? It clarifies or builds or creates, in most people, a more specific image. So you start with a house and you end up with a scene. Do you see? And this type of activity you can do with children because it's demonstrating and showing them very clearly how the words they use will create the image in the reader. And lots of kids write stories and they see it all in their brain. But getting it out of their brain onto paper in such a way that someone else can approximately see what they're seeing is very difficult. You can also create a different mood. What if I said house, stone, dilapidated, brambles, forest, clouds? If I said those words, you get a very different mood. And so helping children understand that image is very much connected with mood, and it is their responsibility as the writer to build that enough. And that's usually easier for some, harder for others. And you can look at some writers who do this very, very well. Who are writers that do it superbly well? Tolkien, maybe too much. Lemony Snicket, right? Very powerful imagery. C.S. Lewis. Even authors that you may not like, but are very, very good at this. Stephen King does it superbly well. Just read the first couple paragraphs of any of his books and poof, you're there. And so you can show this to kids. So find examples. Remember, our whole system is imitation. Imitation is the trick to improving skill. So if you want kids to be more descriptive, what do? Go get a couple paragraphs that are that way, read it to the kids, and then say, okay, let's try and do this together and do it as a group and see if you can describe something like another author. I'll get into that idea of imitation a little bit more very soon. However, you need to have the story sequence chart on the wall so the questions become automatic. What's the question here? Conflict or problem? The question is what? And most problems are the result of a want or need. Want or need. We want to climb the mountain. We need to find the buried treasure. We want to escape the bad guys. Right? We need to get rid of this little ring. All right, so what do they want, need? What do they say? What do they think? What do they do? And those can be all mished up, but if you run that little litany of questions, then you're able to build the plot, build the story, figure out what to put down over here. Climax resolution, the question, of course, is how. How is it solved? And it doesn't always have to be a happy ending, and it can also have some kind of message, some kind of moral, some kind of lesson, some kind of theme, which could be obvious or hidden. What I do is I actually have this on the wall. I have it in their notebook, and then I give a test, and I say, your test is going to be to reproduce this thing from memory. So go home and write it out until you can write it out from memory. I want this on the tip of your brain so that when I say, we're going to do stories, you immediately, as a student, have this there, and you're not wondering what to do. You roll the questions, roll the questions, roll the questions. So having those charts, those models for each unit that are in the notebook, on the wall, or in front of the kids, this is tremendously important. So you don't want to neglect that. Now, I think one other comment I would like to say. This system is so good that, I'll tell you just a quick little story. I was teaching in Walla Walla, Washington. I was going to 9 elementary schools and doing 6 demonstration classes every day in 9 elementary schools in 2 weeks. And so I was doing K through 5 demonstration class, and most of the teachers were stuck at Unit 3. So most of what I was doing, especially in 4th, 5th grade, was Unit 3. Well, I didn't have time to walk in and read a whole story and build the thing up, and I needed them to use a story that they'd already read. So I told all the teachers to get a story and read it and talk about it and have it in the kids' brain so when I got there, we could use the story that they already knew. Well, the first couple days, I was in a panic because I had all these stories. I was trying to read them all and think about them and figure the whole thing out and be ready to teach the class, and I was frazzled, right? Then I suddenly realized, I don't have to read these stories. Why? Because they did. All I have to do is help them ask the questions, get their answers, put them on the chart. So about halfway through this 9 days in Walla Walla, I just quit reading the stories. I just walk in and say, you guys read a story? Good. What's it called? Okay, let's go. You know what? It worked amazingly well. And you might say, but what if they said the wrong thing? What if they said the wrong thing? It's not hugely important because why? This is writing. There's no right or wrong. It's not like math, or the way math used to be, right? It was right or wrong. No, there's 101 ways to do something. So we had a blast, and I got a whole bunch of stories, and some of them fit better than others. Some of them, well, what is the problem? We had to talk about it a little bit. But my advice to you is trust the system, and don't worry if you haven't figured out in advance how every little story is going to lay. And truth is, whether your absolute climax goes here or whether it goes here, it makes no terrible difference. It'll all come out in the wash. You know, and sometimes people say, well, what about a character that shows up at the end? Fine, put him up here and say he exists, or don't. Put him down here and say what he did. It all comes out in the end. So you have to kind of relax, because here we're so rigid. Every sentence, only 3 words, here's the strict rules. And here we're so relaxed. It's almost schizophrenic, but you can get on with it.